Welcome to Missions Life, where we share resources and encouragement for current missionaries, future missionaries, and those praying for missionaries. Missions can be hard, and we want to help you face the challenges of life, leadership, and ministry. We want your life to bear fruit for the gospel wherever you are. I'm Kyle Ferran, here with my co-host and wife, Heather. Today on the podcast, we have with us Dr. Keith Webb, and Keith is a professional certified coach, an author, and a speaker specializing in leadership development. He founded and leads Creative Results Management, a global training organization focused on equipping Christian leaders to multiply their impact. For 20 years, Keith lived in Japan, Indonesia, and Singapore, where he created the coach model and several International Coaching Federation-approved coaching training programs. He's the author of the Coach Model for Christian Leaders. Keith lives in Washington State. And Keith, welcome to the Missions Life podcast. I've been looking forward to our conversation about coaching and missions.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you, Kyle and Heather.
Now, I first actually came across the Coach Model when we were living in Tanzania, and someone actually gave me one of the bookmarks. Actually, I think it was probably a photocopied version of one of your bookmarks, but
Okay.
and it had the coaching questions you had on it. And I immediately got online and bought the book, started reading it. And then a few weeks later, someone told me about one of the trainings that was going on.
Wow.
I was like, I didn't know there was a training for this too. So signed up for that, got involved in it. And the training was, light years more than the book. I was able to get so much more out of it and apply it so much more after going through the training. And honestly, Heather could vouch for this as well, that this has been the most valuable training that I've been able to get as a leader. It has impacted.
And as a husband, but we'll talk about that later.
That's good to hear. I always like it with a wife's testimony,
It really has impacted every part of my life and leadership. And so really just thank you so much for your work on that and for taking the time to develop it and share it with others.
Well, thank you. It's so good to hear. And thanks for sharing how you connected originally.
Yeah. Pirated bookmark there, I guess. Still worked. Well, before we dive into the questions today, could you share a little bit about your journey to missions?
Yeah. So I grew up in a Christian church and, coming through high school and so on, wondering what it is I'm going to do with my life, right? And thinking about that. And at the time I had various different ideas, but there was a guy discipling me when I was in high school. I was in his group, and he was maybe 10 years older, and he was connected to Cru, which is the old Campus Crusade for Christ. And he was taking college kids. I was high school, and he was high school staff. So he was taking college kids to Japan for a summer project, they called it. And it was basically you just go there and you're sharing or getting to know Japanese students, speaking English with them, just getting to know them, and then sharing the gospel as you have a chance. And I did that summer. And I was so amazed at particularly the fact that Japanese had zero idea of who Jesus was. They didn't know Jesus from Paul Bunyan. I mean, what do you know about Paul Bunyan? It's like, was that actually modeled after a historical person? We don't know, right? That's how they are with Jesus. They have no idea. It's just this vague figure here. And yet the friends around me in the US, when I would try and share, they'd get mad and, don't want to hear and don't push that on me and all this. And yeah, Japanese were really interested in hearing, understanding about Jesus and so on. And even though they weren't coming to faith, they were interested and had no opportunity to hear before. Well, the logical brain in me and then the Indiana Jones adventurer in me said, wow, Japan would be a great place to start off after college there. So that's what got me going in missions.
That's good. It's interesting how God brings each of us in different pathways into that and uses us accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so today we're going to be talking about coaching, which Kyle mentioned quite a few times during the introduction. But before we get started, could you define coaching for us? Because I know there's a few definitions floating around out there.
Yeah, well, I have one, and I don't know how much it's going to distinguish it from other helping things, which we could do next. But mine is that um, coaching is an ongoing conversation that empowers a person or group to fully live out what God has called them to do. And so fully live out and ongoing conversation. I mean, those are some of the the operative pieces in there, and it really comes down to the how. How do we do that? And coaching is much different than some of the other helping functions out there, like lay counseling or mentoring and so on, in the sense that coaching doesn't provide answers. It provides powerful, reflective questions to help people think about it. And for me, it has to do with drawing out what the Holy Spirit has put in other people, rather than being the conduit of the Holy Spirit to tell people what God's telling them, right?
Right,
which
exactly.
is what I want to do. I want to tell you how God's leading you, and he's telling me and I'm telling you, that type that feels better. But
Mm.
it's about asking questions, asking reflective questions, and then waiting. And in that waiting is listening. And in that listening, it causes people to have to process. And often people don't stop long enough and be still long enough to actually hear what God might be saying to them. And so
Mm.
that's what the coaching process is about.
That's good. It's a little bit different than coaching a little league team. This is taking it to a
Much.
different level of or different angle on coaching there to using those questions. So, in looking back at your journey, what led you into your focus on coaching? What made it important
Yeah, where was
to?
the jump from, sharing the gospel in Japan to coaching ministry?
So I had a full 10 years in Japan. We were doing church planting. I oversaw the church planting planters in our organization there, the missionary side of it. And so I was trying to help people grow and learn and change, but the way I knew it was to tell them what I thought. So otherwise known as teaching or mentoring or advising. And there's good parts of that. We need to do that with people. People need training. I lead trainings, but we don't need it all the time. Sometimes you know what to do, but you're not willing to do it, or you don't think you can do it. And we've got to sort around inside you to figure out what's going on to help you be able to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And so for me, that let's call it a directive style of leadership or an advising style of leadership, it just wasn't that productive in my Japan years. Well, we moved to Indonesia, and after Japan, we moved down to Indonesia, and I'm working with younger than me. So by then I'm late 30s. So I'm working with younger than me who are early 20s. I mean, 19, 18, 20. The leaders are really mature at 23, this sort of thing. And they're working in a dangerous setting because they're Christian background people. They're Indonesians from Christian tribes. I mean, there's so many people groups in Indonesia, and they're Christian background people working in Muslim areas, and that's that is an ongoing tension that had that exploded while we were there. We were there during 9/11, and so all the Al Qaeda, Southeast Asia Al Qaeda stuff was happening outside our town. It
Wow.
was where they had their training bases and secret, things like this. It was very much near, and as Americans, we were threatened and so on. And as I'm working with the Indonesians, the thing about Indonesia is it's hierarchical. In other words, if you are older, more educated, have higher, they assign higher status to you, and then they just want to listen to you and do what you say, and then they don't want to make decisions because they're going to have you make the decision, and they're just going to go do it. wow, this seems like a dream to me. I'm like, this is great. Finally, somebody who will listen to me, somebody who will do, go off and do the things that I'm suggesting, instead of just giving me grief about it. And don't tell me what to do. You're not the boss of, this kind of thing that I was getting in Japan. And so I think this is great. But I felt like the Lord told me early on in my time working with them that my advice is going to get one of these people killed or beaten or thrown out of the villages they worked in. And that kind of stuff happened while we were there and then since we were there. And I realized that what I needed to do was not tell them what I thought or what I thought God might be saying to them. What I needed to do was draw out what the Holy Spirit was saying to them. And I didn't have that discernment process. In theory, I did, but in my actual functioning as so I was a workshop leader. I led training for people. That's what I was doing. And I wasn't in their organization. I wasn't a leader in their organization. I was an outside trainer. So I was leading the training interactively. So I was teaching my bit. It was when I did one-on-one with them that I would just continue teaching and telling them what I thought. And then they would go off and do it because they assigned me higher status because I was older and more education and so on. So what I realized was I needed to find a different way of working with people that had to do with drawing out. And so you can't see my hands on the podcast, but putting in is from me to you. That's put in. We put in with advising, teaching, preaching. Mentoring is often a lot of putting in, right? There's nothing wrong with that, unless that's all you can do. Because the other end of the scale is the drawing out, and that's where you're pulling out from somebody. And that's what needed to happen in that setting. And so when I started thinking about that, I was already familiar with coaching in the sense, this kind of coaching, but I didn't like the idea of it. I wanted someone to coach me, not tell me what to do, but to draw out from me, which I couldn't find anyone who knew how to do that or could do it. But I didn't want to do it with them because I thought my answers were right. I thought I had the wisdom and like this. And very soon I realized, my goodness, God is speaking to these folks, these young folks. He is speaking to them in ways and with things that I'm not aware of. And as I drew that out, I could help them. Basically, I would just tone down the risk level because some of their ideas are like, oh my gosh, it's either going to be really successful or they're going to get killed. And I'm like, okay, how can we mitigate the risk on that a little bit, And so we would talk through it and ease the risk off in there. But it started working. They started coming up with their own answers that based on their own perspective, what they're hearing from God, that fit their personality, that fit their culture, fit their gender, fit their everything. And it wasn't me trying to contextualize my advice to work for them, which never really worked. And so that's how I got into coaching.
Yeah. I think, honestly, deep down, that's what we're hoping for when we try to advise people. We really want them to take ownership of it and want them to get all excited about it. But there seems to be some hurdles when all we're doing is inputting our ideas. What kind of results then did you start seeing when you switched from kind of this advising process to more of a coaching process? And even maybe what changes did you kind of see in yourself, or what results did you see in yourself?
Wow, those are big questions. First, I want to say that, you're saying we want people to own the advice, right, that we're giving them. But there's a saying that I knew before getting into coaching, but it was we own what we discover. And discovering doesn't mean someone told us and I heard it from somebody. That's not the discovery. Discovery is often through experience or through thinking about it or working on it or doing this. And so that is a result right there. Is I don't have to sell. I'm not trying to sell anything. Because every time you give advice, you're trying to sell your advice.
That's true.
Ever so slightly, right? I mean, the easiest way to think about all this is when you think about your kids or your spouse, right? We got an agenda for them and we're trying to sell it off and they don't want it, this sort of thing. And so when you just quit selling when you just start listening, when you start asking them and helping them reflect, they start coming up with their own answers. And then whether those answers are your answers or not, they are often committed to them because it's their idea. They own what they discover. And so when they start to do it, there's greater commitment. What I found was as soon as I gave somebody advice, like the Indonesian, when I gave them advice, if it didn't work, they were just immediately back to me. Hey, Keith, that didn't work. What should we try next? So where's the responsibility? Not on them. The responsibility is on me. So that they're just doing what I say. So they're not actually committed to making it work. They're, in their mind, committed to doing what I'm telling them. And then if it doesn't work, they just come back for more. Well, I don't like that at all. I want the people that I'm working with to be fully committed to doing it. I want them to work through it and figure it out, not just keep running back to me. So what I saw immediately with the Indonesians, well, there's more. Oh, you probably have some cross-cultural folks on here, so maybe I'll show that part of it too. They didn't like it, actually.
Okay.
So when I swapped from telling them what I thought to to asking them, they didn't like it at all, because that puts the responsibility on them. And they weren't comfortable with that, because they wanted me to, or they thought I had all the answers, or answers, not all, but they thought I had answers, and they felt much more comfortable with trying my things than their own. And so I had to get them past that. And I'm not going to tell you how, but I got them past that. And so then what I started to hear was the things they came up with to try out or to do or whatever, they're very similar to what I was thinking, which was probably me not coaching all that well. It was like, so do you think you could try this? It's like got a question mark at the end, but it's really my advice in the question. I'm manipulating with questions. But then I think what happened is I started getting better with asking more just neutral, reflective questions. And they started coming up with answers that I'd never thought of. And it's not that they were crazy answers and I didn't think they would work. They're like answers I didn't think of, but I'm thinking this might actually work well for you. And that's what I'm thinking. And so then I would help them think through the consequences of that, or how to do that, all those aspects of it, so that they could be most, shape up that idea to get it to be most likely to be successful. Then they'd go do it and come back. And it was shocking that some of these things they did was like, it totally worked. Well, I shouldn't be so shocked. They're different than me. They're a cultural insider. They have different everything than I do. And so they came up with an answer that fit them, and it didn't fit me. So that's why I didn't think of it. But once I see them do it, it's fantastic. And that's when I realized, wow, this is really works well. And that's what I see. So that was 20 years ago. And I continuously see this. And this is what keeps me in check from telling everybody what I think they should do, is because I've seen so many people discover it and figure it out through a reflective conversation process. They often can't do it on their own. That's why they're coming to you. And so help them discover some different answers, discover some blockage they might have inside them, some competing values, for example, that are getting in the way, or some beliefs about themselves, or, that, I could never do such a thing. And you help them talk through it, and they realize they could do it. And then suddenly they are doing it, these sorts of things. And I just realized that that's where change is, because really, when it comes down to it, we're trying to help people make changes. We're trying to help people make positive changes in their lives. And it's hard. It's hard for them to make the change. And of course, it's hard for us to dictate a change. So so seeing those changes happen again and again and again in surprising ways, that's results that I'm seeing.
Absolutely. And it has to be exciting to be a part of their process, as you get to sit back and help orchestrate a process that someone else is completely owning.
Well, it is and it isn't. And so you asked what changed in me. It's hard. It really messes with your ego as a leader, because you know what I mean? Because
Kyle's nodding his head furiously over here.
Because leaders we like being the answer person. We like being the person that solved the problem. We like getting the credit for it. And we get a lot of kudos for that. Even, to do that. Whereas in this kind of a coaching role, you're really stepping back. You're letting them own it all. You're just you're just facilitating their reflective process. Now, they may not ever be able to do it without you if you didn't do that process. However, it's so them centered. And then it's not just them centered, it's them connecting with the Holy Spirit centered, that you don't get that much credit. And that's actually hard. And so so that is something that shifted. It's like, okay, so what's my point? Is it to be the smartest guy in the room, or at least think I am, is it to be that kind of thing and to get the ego strokes? Or are we trying to just help people make progress? And if they make progress and they never give you credit, is that okay? Well, that's easy to say for a little bit. But when you start coaching, and this is a major way you work with people frequently, you're constantly not getting credit. You see what I mean? So it messes with your ego in there. But in the end, it's people are making much better changes than they were in my old way of doing things. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it that way. I wouldn't coach.
Yeah. I always remember that quote from I think it was Ronald Reagan that says, "There's no end to what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit." And with coaching, that's you really are letting them be able to take the credit for that.
We love that quote, and in theory, we're behind it. But when it comes to actual practice, boy, it's really hard. It's like somebody puts up an idea in a meeting, and then it goes great, and then the next meeting, that was my idea. And so we end up wanting to, we can not take credit for it for a little bit, but then we still want to take credit for it. And that's, I don't know. I think it's the human condition.
Yeah. Well, I know this has been, the coaching idea has been extremely helpful for me as we moved up here to Western Europe, changing from South Africa and then Tanzania. We didn't have the context even, and working with 8 different countries, to be able to come in as the answer guy to these different countries. So without the coaching questions and being able to help people discover those answers for themselves, we would have been totally unable to lead in this new region here. And so the coaching has been absolutely essential for us to be able to come in and work with people, but not have to feel like I had to be the answer guy to answer all the questions, because I didn't have the answers. Just even if I wanted to, I didn't have them. And so it's been extremely helpful for that. Can you just unpack for our listeners the coach model and just kind of give them a little bit of a understanding of what that looks like?
Well, the coach model is an acronym with 5 steps and then a hidden step, one more hidden step in the first, and it spells COACH. And the first C is connect. It's like a framework for having an empowering conversation. And you can use this for meetings. You can use as a framework for meetings, a lot of things. The first is to connect, and that's in the C. And you're connecting with the person, finding out how they are, what's how they're coming to your conversation that day, and lots of different things on that. And it could be very short like that. And then the next step, though, is O, and that's for outcome. And it's, what's the agenda of our meeting? What is it we're trying to accomplish here? And what do you want from this conversation? And this is the biggest thing, I think, that separates professional coaching from so many helping functions. We go into my old mentoring meetings. We just start, we're talking, and then we're chit-chatting, and then I think we're on the topic that they want to talk about, and we start working on that, and I start giving them, telling them, this is my mentoring way, but telling them what I thought about it, my experience with it, and they're like engaged with that. We're talking about it like this. But then there would be those meetings where we'd have a nice conversation like this for an hour and a half, and as we're getting up and leaving the restaurant, they'd say, there was something I was hoping we could talk about today, and we didn't get to it today, but maybe we can next time. And that is just like, what it means is you just talked 90 minutes around something engaging that they were interested in, but it's not really what was on their mind. It's not really what was on their heart. And so
Yeah.
outcome is about finding out up front what it is that they want to work on, talk about, reflect on, and then what part of that. And
Yeah.
it's a super big, powerful step. And if you start doing this in conversations, it makes a huge difference. Meetings makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
So
I'd probably come back to that intentionality that you talked about in your definition there.
yeah, exactly. Intentionality. It is. It's an intentional conversation. My wife Lori calls it. It's the difference between a coaching conversation is not a coffee conversation. A coffee conversation, you sit down and you chit chat, and it's pretty 50-50. You know, the other person shares, and then you share, and you might ask a question, they answer, and then they might ask you, what about you? And then and you go back and forth. It's like 50-50, and it's sharing like this. Coaching conversation is not like that. It's more 80-20 with you as the coach having the 20. And that 20 is made up of almost all questions. You don't have time to tell your story and your advice on that. You're just on listening. So you're connected with the person, you got the outcome. So now we know what we're going to talk about and where you want to get to by the end of the conversation. We don't know how we're going to get there, but that's what the process is. And so now we have it's not a roadmap. We just know the destination and we heard usually where they're starting. We heard where they're starting and where they kind of want to get to. So then A is awareness. And awareness is just continued reflection on what you're talking about. Because during outcome, you're also finding out all kinds of things about where they're wanting to be, how they're feeling about it, where they're stuck. And then you go into awareness, you start exploring it in many different ways. And then if it's an hour conversation, that awareness might be 30 minutes of the conversation. Whereas the first connect is 5 and maybe 10 at the most, and out comes another 5 or 10, and then 30 minutes exploring. And then you get to the second C, which is course. Course is actions, course of actions, or course of further reflection. So it's the line of, hey, let's say I'm talking with Heather. Hey, Heather, I know we haven't solved everything in what you wanted to work on today, but how would you like to take that forward from here? Outside our conversation. And she could have some action steps. She could have some further reflection. She could say, you know what I'm thinking is I need to talk with this other person who knows more about this, and I'm going to do that. And then I might come back and help her sharpen that up. I say, so what is it you want to find out from that person? What do you want to ask them? What are you hoping to learn? Helping her kind of get her learning plan going. And that's what course is about. And then finally, it's highlights. H for highlights. And highlights it's not a review. It's more of it's more of asking them what insights they're taking away from this conversation. And often those insights haven't been said yet. They're actually connecting things that they haven't talked about yet when you give them a chance at the end.
Okay. And
then they go out and they do their action steps and come back, and and during that connect, this is where the hidden one more step is in the C and connect right at the beginning, is to ask about follow up on action steps. So as you met with that person, Heather, what'd you learn? What'd you gain from that? And then where does that take you? And then as you did that action step, what did you gain from that? And so it's not a full reporting back. The point is it's a chance to learn from the experience the person did between sessions like that. And then from there you would go into outcome. So as you think about today's conversation, where would you like to focus? And then we go, and then we're around the loop again. And that's the coach model.
Hey, that's awesome. I think what the biggest change I noticed in my conversations as a leader with people were two things. One was motivation, because we took the time to set the outcome. Like, they were really able to say, okay, yeah, I do really want this. And they were able to clearly articulate what it is that they were going after. And they owned that then. And that led to the motivation factor, because knowing what you need to do is very, very different than being motivated to do it. And
Yes.
so those are two very different things. That's one of the things I learned there. The other one was that they owned the steps. They owned what the steps they were going to make, because they were part of that formulation. Whereas before, in my purely mentoring model of giving advice and talking to people, it was my plan. It wasn't their plan.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were able to come up with those steps, it was far more effective. And then when I came back, I was able to ask the follow up. What progress did you make? But it was actually on their plan that they had made. So it wasn't like, did you do what I told you to do? It was, hey, how did that work? And we could improve on that. And so that totally transformed those conversations I was having as a leader, and people made far more progress, and it was much more effective in that, to be able to help them in that way. So it was extremely helpful that way.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Out of sheer curiosity, is there one of the steps that you consistently see is harder for people, or takes a little deeper thought or a struggle that's there?
Well, yeah, all of it seems to be a challenge to people, except for connect. Connect is just chit chatting.
Okay, yeah.
It's stopping the connect that is, and moving into what we're going to work on today. That can be a challenge, but it's so the biggest challenge is outcome.
Okay.
So it's ironic, because I think outcome is actually the most fruitful step of the model. If you do outcome well, the rest of the conversation is going to be much more fruitful. If you do outcome poorly, or you don't even get an outcome, then you're just wandering and chatting, and it's a nice chat, but it becomes a coffee conversation. We're just chatting. There's not enough intentionality about what we're chatting about. So we never know, if you don't have a solid outcome, you never know whether you're on a rabbit trail or not. Like right now, we're talking about the coach model. Is that a rabbit trail? Well, no, because we're talking, we set it up that we're talking about what is professional coaching, and talking with me about that, right? So we know that's on the agenda. And so that's how we know, is because we had that as an outcome for for the conversation we're having on this podcast. And so outcome, what happens is people they hear the first problem that comes up, and they're often running on it. It's like, oh, there's a problem. Oh, that's solid. I understand what that is. And yeah, I've got some ideas for how they could pursue that. And then even if they don't give advice, they start asking questions. They're just like, boom, 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 questions, because they heard a problem and now they jumped on it and they're helping them. But that might not be the problem that they want to work on today, or the most fruitful problem. And even the person you're coaching, the coachee, might think that's the most fruitful problem. But if you do the outcome process, you're going to ask what's underneath it, what's behind it, and so on. And often what we find is the thing they come there saying, I want to talk about this, it's actually, the way they frame this is actually not the best way to go after it. It's a different framing, same problem, bigger problem, but it's something else behind it. And if you can look around for that first, you can find it. And then the whole conversation, much more fruitful.
Sometimes it's kind of the difference between dealing with a symptom of something and getting to the root issue. And as you're asking those questions, and if you can get down to those root issues, it can transform people's lives.
Yeah.
Whereas symptoms is just, it's this problem, yes, but there may be an issue deeper that is causing that to be a problem that you can get to.
Yeah, because people are always bringing you, so they're bringing you their problems, but their problems are usually solutions that they think is going to fix a different problem. So the problem is, I can't achieve this, right? So what that means is that achieving this is the solution to something else. So I want to know what the something else is first, because I want to check to see, is this the only solution for that? Or is it even the best solution for that? Or are there other bigger options like that? I had a guy come to me and he says, Keith, can you help me raise 10 this is a number of years ago, it was cheaper then, but can you help me raise $10,000? And I said, sure, let's talk about that. So what do you need the $10,000 for? So this is me going behind it. He goes, oh, because I want to get an MBA. And so now I'm like, okay, so what do you want an MBA for? And he said, oh, because I want to get a different job. Okay. And what do you want a different job for? Oh, because I'm looking for much more fulfilling work in my life. And I say, well, what do you mean by fulfilling? And we start talking about what it is and what he's looking for. And what he's looking for is a fulfilling career that has him input with people and not just working the 9 to 5 in a cubicle and all this. And so I said, okay, so I understand what you're trying to do is that. I say that back to him. And he goes, yeah, that's exactly what I want. So that's why I need an MBA and I need $10,000. And I said, would you be open to exploring other ways to transition into a fulfilling career like that, like you described, that doesn't require $10,000 and 2 years of post-education to get to? He goes, I suppose, but I can't think of that way. I said, well, that's what we would do together, is to think about that. And then if we come back around to got to get an MBA, then let's work on that. He goes, okay. Well, end of the story is 3 sessions later, he was off and running on pursuing a new career path that exactly fit his thing without an MBA and without raising $10,000. That's maybe a dramatic example of looking behind it, but that's often the case. And that's why outcome makes so much sense, because if we spent our coaching time straight on his $10,000 and then getting into a good MBA school, he might actually not be wired to do an MBA. He might not actually be wired to go back to school like that and so on. And then those would be things we'd be coaching on, right? You see how we'd be struggling against it the whole way. Even though I'm coaching him about what he wants. Right. So this is there's the art and the science to coaching, and this is part of the art of it.
Yeah, it's a great example there.
Yeah, Kyle and I have really enjoyed taking your training and have found it so helpful, like Kyle has said, in our line of work. But we've also seen how we've benefited using it in our regular lives, with our kids, with, each other. Just the other day, or maybe a couple of weeks ago, I was chatting with one of the girls. They had called and said something along the lines of, hey, Mom, I need your advice on this, and knowing the situation in my head, I had a few really good things that I could give them and a few things I wanted to be like, and don't do this.
Yes.
But, I had to take a pause and think, I'm trying to raise adult children that think on their own and really want to own their next steps. And so I was able to take a pause. I'm trying to congratulate myself right now because I'm not very good at that sometimes. Yeah. But take a pause and just ask, well, what ideas do you have? And oh my goodness, the ideas were amazing. Spot on. And it gave the opportunity to be like, hey, let's chat about those. Which one do you want to chat about? Let's get doing this. And it felt right. It felt like a really good dialogue with my child. Now, granted, there's times, in parenting where you just say no and stuff. And I think we're going to talk about that in a bit, about how we can infuse coaching. But what are some ways that you see it useful just across the board, not in a professional sense?
Well, your story is fantastic. I love to hear that. Even though they tempted you with the word, Mom, I want your advice. It's like, she said she wanted my advice, but then when I gave it, she gets mad at me. Mom, right. I'm not going to do that. You start getting that. Depends on the age of the adult kid, but it's like, yeah, we got that. Your story. I love your story because we get sucked in when somebody says, I want your advice. Well, that's because that's how they think it has to work. Is I got a problem, so you tell me what you did or what you think. And there's other ways to make it work. And one of the other ways is what you did, Heather. You ask questions, reflect, and then you realize she's got really good ideas. And see, we miss that because we don't stop long enough to ask, well, what do you think? What are you coming up with? Oh, so what's keeping you from doing those 3? Well, and that's where that's where the leverage is. That's actually where she needs the help, is right there. She doesn't need the help with the ideas. What she needs is the help was the implementing of the ideas. And
Yeah.
you uncovered that, and what you described is almost like the outcome process, right? You're uncovering what it is, what she's looking for, what she wants, and that kind of thing. And I think when leaders start to do this, well, anybody, when anybody starts to do this, when you start having conversations, and instead of just jumping to, oh, I know what they mean, or I know what they want, just that leap right there gets us in trouble, because
Mm.
they often don't know what they need, and they often don't know what they want exactly. We have to help them surface it. And we help them surface it by asking. And they're simple questions like, so what is it you want from that situation? Well, I want, and they wave their hands around. They don't know. And they think they know. But when you start asking just neutral questions to get them to describe it, it's like I want a fulfilling job. Well, what do you mean by a fulfilling job? Well, it's a job that's fulfilling, as they wave their hands around. It's like, he doesn't know what a job is that's fulfilling. And that's part of what he knows. What he's got isn't, but he doesn't know what would be. And so that's part of what we end up doing in these conversations. And so these conversations can be casual conversations. We did, I remember with my teenage kids, we were going to go on vacation, and we do family vacations each summer. And the previous summer, there was a little bit of tension and conflict about our schedule during the vacation. And so Lori and I thought, oh, let's have during one of our dinners, let's talk about what basically its outcome for the vacation. So let's talk about what we want from our vacation. So I didn't use so what result would you like to take away from our vacation this summer? I didn't, I didn't use that question, excuse me, but I just simply asked, what do you want to make sure, or so what do you want from our vacation this summer? Immediately one of my children is, I don't want to run around so much. I want to be able to lay on the beach, like this. And, it was more of a, what they don't want, which was fine. But then, the other child shared what they wanted. And then Lori and I shared what we wanted. And guess what? All of our agendas got out. We were much more aware of what was what. And then we were able to, and then a month later, when we went on the vacation, we had a much better time with it. So that's using the coaching skills in that process. But there's just so much of it. I mean, I've had so many spouses come up, both male and female spouses come up and say, Keith, you saved our marriage.
Oh,
He
wow.
listens to me now, or she listens to me now and and asks me questions instead of just telling me everything. It's just this sort of thing. And I think when you stop with the statement versus statement at each other, and you start asking questions, they can still be fighting questions. What do you mean by that? What did you mean when you said I look fat? This is, those kind of, you can still fight with questions, but it's not quite so escalating when you fight with questions. When you fight with statements, everything escalates. It goes up, right? It gets hotter. But when you start, if you want to call it fighting with questions, when you start asking questions during a tense time, it actually stays the same tenseness or goes down. And we did this all the time with our teenage kids. And we de-escalated all kinds of things by asking more neutral questions and hearing from them. And what we'd hear is not just the dumb thing they're wanting to do that we're totally opposed to. We started hearing why. And we started hearing some of the subtle social things that they were trying to protect themselves against, and the social pressures. All of a sudden, our empathy starts going up, even though we're never going to say yes to the thing they wanting to do. Our empathy goes up because we realize why they're wanting to do it, and the why is actually a good why in that. And so, when these coaching skills of listening, asking reflective questions, waiting, not inserting yourself, when that starts getting into you, it really starts coming out in so many different ways in your personal leadership as well.
I noticed for us with our kids too, very similar to what you're talking about there. I went through this first when our kids were just entering high school,
Mm.
and it was a huge help in transitioning to moving from the telling stage of like, no, you can't do that, to dialoguing with them about things and letting them learn the process of making decisions. And that was huge for them to be able to do that. And then also, even just in our own marriage, it has not completely eliminated my advice giving, but it has.
He really likes to give advice. No, let's frame it this way. He likes to fix problems for me,
Yeah,
you know?
Yes.
that's
Right.
his love. That's many people's love language. Mine too, Kyle. So I'm with you.
Yes. So it's helped me to be able to see though that one of the best ways I can actually help solve problems is to help other people solve the problems. And so
Yeah.
I still feel like I'm helping by asking the questions though, because just the advice giving is not helpful in those situations. So it's been very helpful in that sense to just use it like you were saying though. You change the questions a bit. You don't use the exact same questions you'd use in maybe a professional coaching setting in with your teenagers or your wife, but you're still asking those questions to help them and to allow them that opportunity without giving the advice right off the bat.
Yeah. I think what you're hitting on, Kyle, is many people don't make this transition. You have little kids, you just need to tell them what to do. When they don't do it, you pick them up and move them physically, right? Then they get older and they're too heavy to physically pick up and move, but we're still trying to just tell them what to do.
Yeah.
And many parents don't make that transition in the teenage years, and it causes lots of tension. I'm not saying the parent is the sole cause of it. It's the child trying to differentiate between the parents, and that's a natural process like that. And we exasperate it by continuing to try and tell them what to do, like they're 6 years old. And then people can go into adulthood and it's the same thing. I don't want to talk to my mom because every time I do, my mom judges me with her questions, even if she is asking questions, or she does whatever, or I don't want to talk to my dad because like this. So we see that, but it's also with leaders, Kyle. A lot of leaders start off with, you do something well, and then they make you a leader. And we continue in the doing mindset, but we're just going to do through other people, which means we tell them how we would do and we micromanage them. And so just like parents not making that transition of drawing out with teenagers and having more dialogue with teenagers, people who move from the doer individual contributor role in a work or ministry setting often don't make that transition well when it comes to start leading people. They don't do that dialogue either. It's a very similar dynamic.
Yeah, that's really good insight. I know that it's hard to make those jumps though, especially because
Really
we're
hard.
not taught a process, but enter the coach model with the process to be able to do it.
Yeah. It's I think you used the term infusing coaching in the training. That's where you're taking that coaching and you're infusing it into those different roles that you're in, because you don't really change. You never stop being a parent. You never stop being
Right.
the leader. You're not always switching over to like, okay, now I'm going to be the coach. You're still holding on to that. Can you unpack just a little bit more of that infusing of the coaching
Yeah.
principles in different people's roles? Because some people aren't going to be a professional coach.
Yeah.
So how do you take these and just
Exactly.
infuse them?
Right. So what it means is you stay in your parent role. You're still the parent, but you ask more questions, more neutral questions that aren't judgy, right under the surface. My favorite one is there was a title of a book, and it's for moms. I think it's moms with teenage girls is the theme of the book, and the title of the book just says it all. You're gonna wear that.
Right.
And it's like, okay, that's a question, but not going to get you very far, right? There's just so much judgment in the question, and this sort of thing. So it's how do we ask more neutral questions, curious questions, empathetic questions,
Mm-hmm.
questions coming with empathy. How do we do that more? And when you start to do that, at first, their defenses are up because they're like, I don't know what he's doing asking me these questions, or what mom's doing asking me these questions. But all I know is if I say yes, 4 questions from now, I'm going to be boxed into some corner I don't want to be in. So I'm not going to answer anything. There's, you always have to get past that a little bit. But it's this, when you start asking more questions, being more curious, showing more empathy, you start learning more. And what I learned more was, again, it's like I learned, wow, my daughter's got amazing social pressure that she's trying to balance. And she doesn't know exactly, or she can't quite stand up to that social pressure. And so she's wanting to do the things that the other kids want, are wanting her to do, which we don't want her to do, right? But when I understand why, it's not because she wants to be bad or whatever, what we would judge as bad. She actually wants to just fit in. She wants to be a good, person. She wants peace in her life and be able to focus on her study. And in order to do that, she needs to have her social life in balance. And so to balance it, she thinks she needs to do this. I would
Mm-hmm.
never have that understanding and empathy. I'm not that empathetic of a person to figure that out on my own. I figured that out by asking her questions and starting to actually listen to her when she's 16 and telling me these crazy things. And I'm just like, wow, and not letting the crazy, my reaction stop her from sharing more. And we were able to come up with much better solutions. So it's that kind of integration. It's not that you're always going to draw out. And in the end, I still say no to stuff, and because I'm still the parent. As a supervisor, I'm the president of the organization and supervisor. I hire people, and I fire people, and I'm coaching them in between. But I'm always coaching them as a supervisor. I'm going to coach you how to do your job well. And in the end, if you don't and can't get it together, I'm going to let you go. Right. So that's that mix. But you don't have to be, so you can still maintain your authority. So this is where a lot of people miss it, is they think in order to maintain my authority, I need to just tell. I don't get to ask, because what if they want to do something that you don't want them to do? Well, once you figure out how to integrate it, but yet you're not taking all of the coaching, all of the coaching would be whatever they want to do, they get to try out because it's up to them. It's their life, right? That's all of the coaching, the extreme of it. But we don't do that. It's take what you can and leave the rest, and just use what you can. And what will happen is you'll start to see, wow, I can use much more of these coaching skills than I thought I could.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you do it, you start to see, oh, I can use even more. But you never become a full coach as a parent, and you never become and you shouldn't, or as a supervisor.
Yeah. And even I've just even noticed this is just with our friends and stuff like that, when we're having a conversation and they come up, share a problem or something like that. It may not end up being a whole coaching conversation, but even just using one or two of those questions allows them to think about something from a totally different angle than they had before. And I've seen people's trajectory in life totally change from just some simple questions that they may never remember those, and that's okay. Yeah. But it was exciting to be able to actually just give a question for them to be like, oh, I need to think about that. And they'll then go away, and you see that they are able to find the answer that they were looking for, and to find a solution. And so that's been exciting to be able to use that, just with friends and family, to be able to share those questions like that.
Yeah. And these aren't tricky questions. It's not like you've got these tricky, deep questions. It's often like the illustration earlier. It's like, what do you mean by fulfilling?
Mm-hmm.
And just you asking them that helps them realize, I actually don't know what I mean by it. I know what I'm doing is not fulfilling, but I don't know what I mean by that. And then that sends them down a reflective path. And then they might be able to figure it out on their own, what it means to them. But until you asked, they're like, they think they're set. Because in our minds, we think we're fine, or we think we've sorted it out in our mind until you have to tell somebody about it. Then when you have to tell somebody about it, you realize how unclear you are in your thinking. And it becomes even more so when you have to write it. When you have to write it. So I wrote a book, right? The book was off of the teaching or the training that we had, which I had trained many times. And that, of course, is off my thinking, right? And so the thinking went to the training, and the training got clearer once I did it a few times. So then I'm thinking, oh, easy peasy to write it in a book. Wow, so much harder. And that's the progression. So what we're really trying to do is just if you just ask a few reflective questions in any conversation, in a meeting, in any conversation, usually you'll find ways to help people improve their thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's super helpful. I know one of the helpful tools that, so I do this training with another guy in our organization. We do the coach model training that we got from you. We do it for people in our organization. But one of those tools I was thinking you could share with us is about the generating feedback instead of giving feedback. Is that something you could share just as a really tactical tool for people to be able to take away and use?
Sure. Yeah, it's an acronym again, because I like acronyms because you can remember them. So in the moment, you might actually stand a chance at using it. It's an acronym. It's WIN, win. And it's got 3 questions make up they're like bookmarks. They're the 3 pillars, let's call it, of the conversation. And it's for debriefing something. So for example, Heather, I don't know if have you talked, but let's use Heather's situation, talking with her daughter, her adult daughter, who's wanted advice, right? And Heather listened and asked a few questions instead and got the daughter's advice out. So after that conversation, if that was something that Heather was working on growing in, and it was something that she and I were talking about, we could debrief that conversation. And how we debrief it is use the WIN model. Rather than me give her feedback on what she did, I'm going to generate feedback. I'm going to draw out feedback. So I could ask, so Heather, what did you do well in that conversation? And she could say, well, I waited and didn't give my advice. I was totally ready to give it. But I asked a few questions, and then I might say, so what did that do for the conversation? Well, my daughter kept talking and sharing, and I realized, wow, she knows more about what's going on than she's letting on. So then what did you do? Well, then what did you do? What else did you do well? Well, then I kept asking questions. And then when she came up with and then I asked what ideas, she had 3 ideas. And rather than me jumping on and saying, yeah, that's the one I was thinking, this first one was the one I'm thinking about, which is what I wanted to do. I didn't do that, right? This sort of thing. And so we could go through and we could find out what Heather did well, what she thinks she did well, and process it a little bit. It's not just what did you do well? Oh, I listened and asked more questions. Great. And then just move on. No, we have to process a little bit. And what that does is it reinforces with Heather to do it again next time. So then you can move on in this little conversation, which can be a 2-3 minute conversation. You could go on and say, so Heather, that sounds like you had fantastic results with your daughter. Great job on that. That's fantastic. So when you think about this kind of conversation coming up again with one of the girls, what could you improve? Just coming off of that conversation. You know what it can improve? And then she has something she's thinking about, or she thinks of something that she could improve for next time, right? And improve is not what you do bad. It's just improve. And I think everything could be improved. And so she comes up with her improvement, and then, so that's the I, improve. So what did you do well? That's the W. What could you improve? That's the I. And then how would you do it next time? So that's the N, next time. And sometimes they tell you right off how they do it next time. And other times they just say what it is they want to improve, and they don't say how. So then you ask about it. And basically they leave this little win conversation feeling affirmed, because they got to brag about what they did well. They got to tell you about that. You processed, you celebrated with them. Then you asked in a very curious, still celebrating voice what they could improve. And they're like, oh yeah, you know what I could do. And then very positive energy, go after that. That's the win model. And
Mm.
you can do this in any little conversation. I call it sneaking up. I used to sneak up on my teenagers when they had some big thing that they were doing. I would sneak up on them with this to debrief it afterwards. And it would make improvements. Like when they were hunting for jobs or internships, they were looking for internships during college. So they'd go out and do it. They'd talk to me about how to do interviews. And I said, yeah, make sure you don't talk the whole time, that you ask a few questions, right? So then they come back and we would do the win is, what'd you do well? And they would share what they did well. Yeah, I did this. I was shared what I'm looking for in work. And then we'd do a few of those. And then I'd say, what could you improve? And they would come up with the improvement, not me tell them what they need to do next. And then I'd say, how are you going to do that? And then they go off and do another interview with a different internship opportunity. And that was very positive. And when it came time to them actually finding jobs after school, well, guess what? We prepped beforehand with what they're going to do during the interview. And then we debriefed after with when, and then they would go on and do more we did this. They were happy to work with me, which made me feel good, you know. They were happy to talk with me.
Right. Well, I think kind of approaching it in this way kind of takes the fear out of debriefing something, especially if you're debriefing something with your boss. You know, if there's a way that we can approach getting feedback in just a positive way that's looking to the next time. You know, what improving, you know, what ways are we going to do this better? Generating their ideas to carry it forward. So many times I think it can be scary when a boss or supervisor wants to, you know, debrief something with you, you know, all right, here it comes. But this is a really good way to just frame it in a positive, forward moving approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we often, so the problem is even the best of us get defensive when somebody wants to give us feedback. And often the closer they are to us, the more defensive they get. I remember when I agreed too wholeheartedly with Lori, my wife said something that she wanted to change, and I agreed too wholeheartedly, and then we got in an argument about me agreeing, and I'm like, wait a minute, you brought this up, you said you wanted to do, you know, it's like and we're all like that, right?
Exactly.
I'm the same. Yeah, I'm the same way in that, and that's where it becomes helpful, and you can imagine. And the other is it's discouraging when you're trying to work on one thing. You know, you've got one problem related to whatever you did. Let's say you made a presentation, and you're trying to fix something that you're doing in that presentation, and then and so that's what you're focused on. And then somebody gives you feedback on a different problem in your presentation afterwards. That's really discouraging. It may need to be fixed, no doubt, but it's like, that's not where I'm focused. I'm focused trying to fix this problem. Can I fix this one first? And then I'll go to these other 4 that you must have for me. You know, you see what I mean? So it's not just that we're defensive. It's also, I think, a developmental thing. So if we can just find out what it is that the other person's trying to work on, we can actually get on their page where they already have energy. And then it feels really positive. The other is when you start doing the win with people, if you do this again and again, when you actually do need to give feedback to them and tell them something, you're going to do it in the context of this positive interactions that you've been having for months. So when you actually do say, hey, there's something else I need to make you aware of, and then you share it. Well, then even from there, it's like, so how did you experience that? And what was your take on that thing that happened? And what do you think about that? And then what ideas are coming up for you about how to handle that? And maybe you need more time and we can come back on it. But you see what I mean? You're right. When you still may need to tell them feedback at some point, but you're going to do it after this really positive, a series of these positive debriefing interactions where you're not correcting them.
Yeah. It also creates a just kind of a an atmosphere of learning
Mm.
for the other person, or a mindset of growth for the other person, that you're, by asking those questions, you're kind of instilling in them that, oh, I should be growing. I should be asking myself these questions. And so there's a
Mm,
lot more
yeah.
openness to actually grow and learn and accept feedback, even if it's their own feedback that they're getting initially. So it's
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah. So, if someone wanted to grow in their coaching skills, what practical steps would you give them?
Well, so I mean, there's several layers and levels. I mean, one way is, Kyle, you described getting a hold of my book, The Coach Model for Christian Leaders. So we've seen, that's the I don't know how much it costs, $18, $17 version of how you could grow in coaching skills. You can read the book, you can start trying out. There's tons of dialogues and sample questions in there. You could start trying that out, and I've heard of people who made big shifts it around that. The next level is, we do have a 90-minute to kind of taste and see, that's part of our training, where we actually do practice on 3 different coaching skills, the win model being one of them, and we offer that regularly through our organization for free, and you can join something like that. The other is go to a short training. Kyle, you mentioned that you do the coaching workshop for Christian leaders. You're leading that. We have a different version that is approved by the International Coaching Federation, the big professional coaching association. Ours is called Coaching Mastery Foundations. They're both short trainings that for a few $100s, you can join and get training. And the thing about the training is, it's not just hearing about the coaching skills or hearing about the questions you should ask. You're getting to see it demonstrated, and then you're getting to practice it. And
Mm-hmm.
really, when you try it out, people find it's way harder than they think it is. And then they also are surprised by, I can't believe that this person I just met, who coached me for 15 minutes in a practice, actually helped me, and yet I don't know them.
In a huge ways too.
Yeah, yeah, and they're really surprised, and so that's the experience of being coached in it, and then of course the practice coaching, and so that comes through those short trainings. And so, Kyle, I don't know how regularly you're offering that, but but I would say people listening to this, contact Kyle. You can go to our website and find it. But a short training, there was a study that was done that it was in a business setting, but basically what they found is that people who had no training in this kind of coaching thought they had heard something about coaching, and they thought they were coaching, but they were actually just micromanaging people.
Hmm.
And then once they got a short training, and I can't remember how many hours it was, 10 hours or 12 hours or something like this of training. And professional coaches were rating the people before and then after, and then the participants who were being coached rated them before and after. The coach, the manager who was using coaching skills rated them before and
Ouch.
then after. And all the scores went up
Hmm.
with just a short training. They just went up huge in helpfulness of what. So I'm a big advocate of getting a short coaching training is really beneficial. You don't have to go on and get a full, 60-hour professional length coaching training. You don't have to do that, although you can, and it will exponentially increase your results. But just a short training like what you're offering and what we offer will make a huge difference for people.
Yeah, and I just want to just add to that with highly recommend all those things that you've with the book, the short training, either one that you're doing. We only offer it twice a year, but you guys have a lot more of them on there, so there's a lot more options. We'll put the link in the show notes here when we get done to your website where people can find that training, and then just even if people go on to get the fuller mastery training, and then even going on beyond that, the trainings you have, like with coaching the whole person, that was completely transformative for my own life, and just learning, going through that as well. And so just the continued trainings are so helpful, but starting with something is absolutely helpful in any area of life. So thank you for sharing those things and offering those resources for people. It's so helpful for many, many different areas of whatever we're doing in life or ministry. At the
Yeah.
end of the podcast, we'd like to ask people a few just kind of fun, random questions. What's something you've been reading recently or listening to that you've enjoyed or found helpful?
Okay. So, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is not, I'm thinking, oh, they're probably looking for some sort of coaching or leadership book or some sort of devotional type thing. A Gentleman in Moscow.
Okay.
Okay.
That book, and it's only 2 episodes in, so if anything happens in the other episodes, it wasn't my fault for recommending it. But so the thing I like about it is I think people blame it on post pandemic social behavior, that we don't know how to behave socially since the pandemic. But the thing I like about the Gentleman in Moscow is the the count. He's the main character. He's just so socially graceful. And the thing he's socially graceful at is making people feel good about themselves and honoring people.
Hmm.
His line is, "How may I be of service to you?" And I'm and plus he's got these little philosophies of life that I love. They're just so funny, in there. But I like that, and I think I can be a bit uncouth at times, and a bit too sarcastic, and so it's like I want to turn on his kind of some of his social charms a bit in there, because I think it actually honors people more. So
And
there's
is it a
what's
book
that?
or a movie? Is it a
Yeah,
book or a
A
movie?
Gentleman in Moscow is a book.
Okay.
It's the other thing I love about it is it's a cross cultural type thing and spans a number of years, and so it's showing uh, and it shows how he changes and how he adapts,
Hmm.
and how culture around him is adapting. So there's several layers to it, but I find it completely rich, a completely rich read. I think I've been reading it each summer for the last 4 summers,
Hmm.
or something like this, and I don't want it to end. It's just one of those kind of books. And then they just came out with the I don't know how many parts it's going to be, an 8-part one of these TV miniseries they just
Oh,
came
okay.
out with. That's where.
Okay.
But
Got
they're
it.
only on episode 2, so I don't know. There shouldn't, according to the book, there shouldn't be anything in it too naughty. So
Understand how that goes. Well, here's another question for you. I like asking this one. What activity or hobby do you like to do to stay energized or refreshed?
number one is travel. So we just
I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah, we just spent. So we're now living in Washington State, and we were 20 years in Asia, in Japan, Indonesia, and then Singapore, and then I traveled, wow, 100 nights a year for years, and then of course the pandemic shut all that down, and we've now shifted, do our training through Zoom, which is very effective. But I love cross cultural. I love energizing. I had a mentor who was doing some spiritual formation mentoring with me, and he says, Keith, when have you most clearly heard from God?" And as I reflected on it, the 2 times that like really came up to me, both of them I was traveling. I was in London, sitting in a Starbucks at the window, the table next to the window. People are going by me like this. I'm journaling, reflecting, just by myself, drinking coffee in London. That was one,
Mm.
and another one was in an airport. It was also internationally, but in an airport where I had like 4 hours, and I'm just, coming off of a training. And so that's always an emotional thing to finish up something like that and doing it. But I think it's funny. My wife will even say, no, go on this trip, go. Because every time I go, I come back with greater energy, greater
Mm.
vision. So usually, well, maybe she wants to get rid of me. I don't know. I don't think so, but there's a payoff for me. And so that's actually a setting for staying energized.
That's great.
What's a resource, tool, app, or life hack that you found helpful?
Is to think about that. My number one thing, the hack that I find helpful is get rid of your social media apps. Just get rid of them, and so that you don't automatically go. I find that for myself, at any lull in anything, the phone comes out, and I start scrolling through emails, through whatever, and so it's not good, I think, for the brain and for reflection and for energy. And so I think getting that stuff off your phone, and certainly not having a watch. I don't have an Apple Watch. I'm a total watch guy. I don't know how many watches I have. I have a lot of watches and mechanical watches. It's a hobby of mine. But I don't have an Apple Watch because I do not want anything pinging me and doing that. And I find it distracting. And that's my life hack, I think, which I'm still working on, by the way.
Right.
Keep that anxiety levels down by cutting out the inputs, right?
So where can people find out more about you and all your resources?
Right. So Creative Results Management is our organization. And so it'd be creativeresultsmanagement.com. And that is our training organization. You can find the Coaching Mastery Foundations. That's that first course there. So it's ICF approved, the big coaching association. You can find out there. I also have a blog at keithwebb.com. And there's a couple hundred articles on there on everything from cross-cultural to coaching to leadership to productivity. And the best way to find those is either use the category tabs at the top or just do a search for something in there. And then at the bottom of each article, it will lead you to 5 more similar themed articles. And so, so it's just a big database of all kinds of articles. So if you just keep following the leads, you might find something helpful.
Yeah, there's some good stuff on there. We've used some of that and enjoyed that. So,
and your book that can be found on Amazon, the Coach Model.
Right, the Coach Model for Christian Leaders. You can get it at Amazon.com. If you're in the U.S. If you buy it from us, we'll send you a hard copy, printed copy, and then a little Coach Model card that comes with it. And it also comes with a free study guide if you get it from our store. And the store's link is on both the websites I mentioned.
Okay, and we'll put those in the show notes. And if people are typing in the keithwebb.com, it's Webb with 2 B's. So just to remember that. Well, Keith, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It has been a real joy for us to spend the time with you.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's good to see you both. I'm sorry I wasn't able to see you on my recent trip to Portugal, but maybe next time.
Maybe next time, yeah. We'll have to meet for Pastacia again.
Yes, it's a must.
Well, that's all for this show, and we want to thank you again for spending your valuable time with us today.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider taking just a moment and giving us a great review. Your review will help people find the podcast and allow these resources to encourage more people. If you took something valuable away from this episode, please share it with someone who would enjoy it.
If you'd like to find the show notes, blog posts, and free resources for ministry and leadership, as well as some information on my book, Overflowing, visit kylefarran.com. That's KYLEFARRAN.com. Hope to see you soon on a future podcast.